And of course, news just in, we've just noted that the South African Business Rescue Practitioners have been ordered by the Johannesburg Labour Court to stop the process of retrenchment at SAA. And the court has ruled that the practitioners must provide a proper business plan for retrenchment to commence. And of course, victory there for NUMSA as well as the South African Cabin Crew Association. But of course, we'll take a look at how the markets have been performing this afternoon. But what we need to do right now is just to have a meal when it's still warm. Owen Nkomo is Chief Investment Officer of Inkunzi Investment. Owen, thank you very much for coming through. Man, SAA in the headlines again, and this time around, whether it should go or it shouldn't is, a story that's still trending, but it's really confusing now. Should it stay or should it go?
Yes, interesting times, Colin. Interesting times, and I think we always knew that we'll come to this point with South African Airways, where a decision will have to be made about whether to allow it to continue to exist in its current shape or to do something totally different. We had privatization being muted, and we've had people saying, let's just let SAA go. But unfortunately, obviously, as per your last commentator was talking there, there's jobs at stake, and a whole lot of things must be considered before South African Airways, gets born again or gets shut down. So it's going to be a difficult one to see how the conversation around SAA settles. But whatever happens, one hopes that the whole world has reacted in a manner that says, let some of these aeroplanes, go bust, and that has happened. I mean, guys like Warren Buffett have sold out of their airline holdings, and unfortunately for us, the challenge we've seen with SAA is that it's always been a drain on the government, particularly because of bad management. Now, do we give SAA another chance and hope that it's going to start to be managed better after the COVID concerns? I think that is a very difficult question to answer. But what I can tell you is that many businesses out there are starting to reshape their futures, and we certainly need a different South African Airways. What I think perhaps maybe the unions need to be considering is to be at that table with the government when they plan to create this new airline, so that their voices are going to be heard and they don't get left behind in the creation of this new opportunity if it does indeed go ahead. But whatever the case is, I don't think we've seen the last of this SAA saga, Colin.
Owen, something a little bit technical here in as far as understanding the markets and whether or not to invest in the airline business. With Warren Buffett's analogy and, this argument on whether or not the airline stocks should be the ones not viable during this time. It's been quite some time. I mean, like since 2016, there was this business advice that anybody who wants to risk his money shouldn't go into the airlines business. But then what's your argument against the fact that whether you invest or not, people are still going to fly all over the world after all this COVID-19 pandemic? So why disinvest in something that will continually exist?
So I believe, Colin, that from a Warren Buffett perspective, he thinks maybe he's either made enough money from the industry and he thinks that the industry is going to take a different shape after this one, and he doesn't think that his calculations are going to come out in the manner he planned them to when he initially invested in the company. But I think an important question also to think about is the question of where the price of oil is. It's trading at almost an all-time low, with the price of oil having been pushed down all the way from 50 to 8 is the guys in the airline industries use a derivative that comes out of some of the Brent crude oil stuff that gets that has actually been depressed in terms of the price. So I used to understand the airline industry to just be a bet on the price of oil. Now that the prices of fuel have gone down, one was thinking that as a major contributor to these guys, bottom line or top line, depending on how you look at it, one would have thought that the airline industry is in a space where it can start doing much better. But unfortunately, the coronavirus has played us a card that we never expected to be played. And I think that, you'll most likely see the airlines that have lower operating costs surviving into the post-COVID environment. Anyone who's got a very high cost base and doesn't have anything special to offer, unfortunately, I think is still at risk of not making it after this environment that we are going through at the moment, Colin.
So what can we learn from other transformation models of airlines? I mean, like Lufthansa, for example, was having difficulties, but it was transformed back into profitability. And when you look at Emirates, for example, there was the notion of getting collaboration between sectors. Say, for example, if you say Air Malaysia together with the tourism industry in Malaysia that would lure tourists into a country, then you would have the concept of Malaysia, truly Asia, being honed in, and then people will travel using that airline, and therefore the numbers are skyrocketing. Instead of an airline operating in silos, it should have collaboration with other industries so that it can be able to sustain itself.
So the principle that you've just explained there is a principle of using economies of scale. So if you look at a regional formation like South Africa, or other like Southern Africa, SADC, for example, I think potentially if the airline operators in the region got together, they could find a way to partner with each other and make sure that they reduce the cost of per unit cost of delivering a flight per individual. So I think those ideas that people have to start thinking about now, because if they don't do that, Colin, I mean, the cost base is going to continue to be a big problem for business in general, because we think that revenues are going to continue to be a problem. They're already a problem right now, given the COVID lockdown. And when we open again, we'll be struggling to drive earnings up based on the challenges that are being borne right now from the COVID lockdown. So the only lever that you can pull is the cost side of things. And I think that anything that helps airlines deal with the reduction in the pricing of their operations should be considered. And I think what's important as well, Colin, is that whatever is done with SAA going forward, it must be run professionally. It must be run in a manner that says, let us make sure that, people do the right things. We don't find SAA being involved in all sorts of contracts that are going to work against SAA. Like we have been told in the past that SAA's legacy issues relate to some of the contracts that they got in the past, which have obviously been a burden to the airline in terms of them trying to restructure their financing and some of their procurement contracts. So one does hope that the call for a new airline at SAA doesn't see a lot of people losing jobs, but importantly creates a more efficient airline, if that is ultimately the route that is going to be taken by a government. We must be sensitive to the fact that the economy is going through a difficult period. The more people lose jobs, the more people are going to be disenfranchised, social unrest is going to happen. And I believe that, it's a tough balancing act, but an answer has to be found somehow, Colin.
All right. Thank you very much for making time through and making this quite insightful analysis of the airline industry. Thank you so much, Owen.